going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on DRF TV. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition, going back, taking a look at a couple of big Grade 1 races from Belmont Park this past weekend, the Grade 1 Belmont Derby, the Grade 1 Belmont Oaks. We'll also dive into a couple of the other stakes races that were run at Belmont Park on Saturday. The difference is very similar to last week's recap because there was some ongoing construction down in New York at the Racing Forms offices. It will not be a full-blown stakes montage, or you will not have the weekend's best as far as buyers are concerned, but I will give you some just quick hits and thoughts regarding those other stakes races from Belmont on Saturday afternoon. However you listen to this thing, thank you for doing so. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. However you listen, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, make sure the bell icon's lit up. And then again, over on Apple Podcasts or whatever the case may be, just write us a little review. It's greatly appreciated as always. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or directly to me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Let's dive into it. The Grade 1 Belmont Derby, 1.25 miles on the inner turf for 3-year-old males. Let's take a look at the field. There were 14 signed on. This was a beautiful betting race. Goes so many different ways. Post-time favorite was a shade under 5-1. That was Seismic Wave. You had a number of contenders. I mean, this really goes to show how wide open this race was. With the exception of Blenheim Palace coming over for Aidan O'Brien, who really, by all accounts, seemed to be nothing more than a pacemaker for his uncoupled stablemate in here, Cape of Good Hope. You had 13 horses between 9-2 and 20-1. It doesn't get any juicier than that. You could have gone so many ways. Many of these horses had credentials that made sense in a spot like this, and you got a little bit of a surprising result, in my opinion. We'll dive into that a little bit more after we see the stretch run. Here it is, the 2019 Belmont Derby.
Up on the outside. Henley's Joy is in behind horses. Spinoff is there with Pluska Parfait. They're into the stretch, and it's Social Paranoia. Arriving at the 8th pole in front, Henley's Joy runs at him on the outside. It's these two with Henley's Joy and Social Paranoia stride for stride. Rock Emperor is finishing strongly on the far outside, but it's Henley's Joy in front, and Henley's Joy wins the Belmont Derby. Social Paranoia was second. Rock Emperor was third.
Henley's Joy gets back to the winner's circle. He wins the Grade 1 Belmont Derby at odds of 20-1, the second longest shot on the board. Social Paranoia runs second at 16-1, and Rock Emperor, one of a handful in here for Chad Brown, runs third at odds of 10-1. Let's talk about the winner, Henley's Joy. 4 of 11 lifetimes, 7 times in the exacta from 11 lifetime starts. Now over $953,000 in career earnings, owned by Bloom Racing Stable, LLC, trained by Mike Maker, bred by Ken and Sarah Ramsey in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Jose Lezcano. You can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He's by Kitten's Joy out of a bluegrass cat mare named Bluegrass Music. 97 Beyer speed figure, 115 pace, or time adjusted, I should say. Time Form US rating for Henley's Joy, winning this year's Belmont Derby. For what it's worth, the half, 3/4, and mile calls, according to Time Form US, all color-coded red, meaning it was perhaps hurting horses that are forwardly placed, and maybe playing into the hooves of horses coming from well off of it. That just makes the effort from both Henley's Joy and Social Paranoia that much more impressive, in my opinion. They were both relatively close to the pace. Sure, they weren't actually right there with the first and second place runners, who for the majority of the early portion anyway, that was Moon Colony as well as Blenheim Palace. They were the ones cutting out the fractions, and they were honest. 23-1, 47-4, 11-3 for 3/4. The boys stopped the clock in 59.29. They really kicked home impressively. Henley's Joy finishes in 22.66. Social Paranoia, 22.87. Rock Emperor from basically dead last in 22.07. I think this was a pretty solid group of horses that ran in this race. Now, the reason I say I'm mildly surprised about the Henley's Joy result is because it felt like I don't want to say he was no match for a number of common foes exiting the local prep for this race, the Pennine Ridge. And there was also a little part of me that was waiting to see him put it all together. And I know he was a little bit unlucky in a few instances. I just didn't know that we were going to get a giant step forward here in this spot. It's not that the horse doesn't have ability. We saw that he won stakes races as a 2-year-old. He's won them or come close to it here as a 3-year-old. He's a nice horse, but this now added dimension as well about being much closer to the pace. That was something else that I personally didn't anticipate. But again, I had terrible opinions all weekend at Belmont Park. So you know, no surprise that a horse like Henley's Joy goes out there and gets the job done when I wasn't on board with him. He goes out for good connections. I mean, I can't say enough about Mike Maker. He does a great job, particularly with these longer distance turf runners. Jose Lezcano, I believe he just wrapped up the riding title at the spring meeting at Belmont Park as we get ready to head up to Saratoga this week. And Bloom Racing, obviously we know what their involvement with a horse like Midnight Bisou. They have this horse now, a Grade 1 winner in Henley's Joy. They do great work as well. So it's an instance where from a connection standpoint, it's really not a surprise. I think for me anyway, in this race, I was just a little bit surprised that Henley's Joy was the one that was able to go and get the sort of vast majority, get the lion's share of the prize in here. Social Paranoia, good effort from him for Pletcher and Franco. He was able to get first jump on Henley's Joy, and I think that, again, was more impressive for me that Henley's Joy was able to go and run down a nice horse like Social Paranoia. Rock Emperor coming from way out of it. Theoretically, he was helped by the pace situation. I think it helped to be reasonably close to the front as far as the turf was concerned at Belmont as you got sort of deeper and deeper into the meeting. Just an opinion. Doesn't mean that it's set in stone. But a good enough effort for the first time here in the United States. You assume he's going to continue to improve being here for more time with Chad Brown. Chad also had Digital Age. I thought he and Seismic Wave, for the most part, yes, they were at the back of the pack, but rounding the far turn, they were saving ground. Maybe Seismic Wave got stacked up a little bit, and maybe it cost him a little bit of momentum, which we know is very, very valuable in these grass races, but I just thought he was a little bit flat down the lane where some of these other horses seemed to kick home in a much better fashion than he did. Pluska Parfait, thought this was a fine return to the grass, thought he ran just well. Nothing wrong with it at all. You can move forward with this. Standard Deviation, I didn't think it was a great effort, but it wasn't anything to sneeze at. The rest of the field, you take a look. Cape of Good Hope, he continues to sort of play into that narrative that O'Brien's horses, when they come here, they don't run particularly well. I mean, just a few races earlier, and we'll talk about the Belmont Oaks here in a second, he had Just Wonderful rally from well off of it, and she ran a bang-up race. He's done good work with some of the horses that have come over here, and again, we can't say it enough. The horses that O'Brien sends over here at this time of year, they are the B and C string. They are not the A string. The A string will come here for the Breeders' Cup, and I venture to say that we'll probably hear more from Aidan O'Brien as more time goes by. The disappointments in this race, I don't know that you want to necessarily coin a horse like Master Fencer as a disappointment. His form on the main track is certainly better than it is on the grass. It seemed like a little bit of a lofty move here to try this kind of company for his return to the turf. I think back to the main track, he'll probably do some good things. Blenheim Palace, you don't want to hold this against him. He was here for one reason only, to set the pace. Spinoff, I suppose, maybe a little bit of a mild disappointment, but realistically, I said it in the preview last weekend, I kind of felt like this was an instance where I think he's going to do better going shorter and on the dirt. To me, it just seemed like they're going to take a shot in here and see if the turf worked out. I'd like to see him turn back going shorter on the main track, maybe a race like the Allen Jerkins at the end of Saratoga. English B, I expected a little bit better from him. Moon Colony, given the fractions, I don't want to hold this race against him. DeMarshall Lier is the last one we do need to touch on. He was the horse I picked, and it was unfortunate that going down the backside, Javier needed to pull him up. Right front lameness. Doesn't sound like it's going to be a catastrophic injury. We'll find out in time. Obviously, stay tuned to all the Racing Forms writers and reporters. They'll keep you in tune with what's going on there with the latest. But a disappointing situation there for the connections involved with DeMarshall Lier. But really, when we look at it, this is a race. It may have only been 3/4 of a length, but I thought this was a pretty impressive effort from Henley's Joy to get the job done here. 97 Beyer, 115 pace adjusted time form US rating. But all things considered, I thought this was just a good race all around, and we'll find out. Keep in mind, this is the first leg of this new turf triple that they have in New York. There'll be a race up at Saratoga, and then there will be a final run down at Belmont Park in September. So I would assume you're going to see many of these horses come back in that next race up at the Spa here in a few weeks' time. And if that's the case, I don't think any of us as bettors can complain, because you're going to get another beautiful betting opportunity. Whether you like Henley's Joy or you like some of these other horses, it's going to be a wide open affair. Hats off to the connections involved with Henley's Joy. He gets the job done. He is a Grade 1 winner, the winner of the 2019 Belmont Derby. Seventh race at Belmont, the first of the Grade 1 races, the Grade 1 Belmont Oaks. Take a look at the field of 3-year-old fillies going the 10 furlongs on the inner turf course. 9 of them signed on. Post-time favorite was Newspaper of Record for Chad Brown. She was brilliant as a 2-year-old. Her 2 starts thus far as a 3-year-old definitely left a little bit to be desired. Question twofold: would she be able to rate and relax early on? And would she be able to see out a mile and a quarter? If not her, then who? You had some intriguing candidates that you could consider as upset alternatives. Ultimately, the second choice put on a bit of a show. Here's the stretch run of this year's Belmont Oaks.
Cano comes wide. They're into the stretch, and it's Jody still there. Concrete Rose runs up alongside at the 8th pole. Newspaper of Record did not go on. Concrete Rose strikes the front. Jody is back into second. And finishing fast is Just Wonderful down the outside. Cambier Park is moving with her, but it is Concrete Rose. Concrete Rose romps in the Belmont Oaks. She won it by 4 lengths over.
Concrete Rose, much the best in the Belmont Oaks. She wins as the 5-2 second choice. Just Wonderful, one of the Aidan O'Brien horses, comes rallying from well off the pace. A pretty impressive effort from her at 18-1. And Cambier Park, one of the other Chads in this spot, 7-2, finishes third. Let's talk about Concrete Rose. 5 of 6 lifetime, over $818,000 in career earnings. Owned by Ashbrook Farm and BBN Racing LLC, trained by Rusty Arnold, bred by Ron Patterson in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Julian Leparoux. And the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card, she is by Twirling Candy out of a Powers Court mare named Solarina. 90 Buyer 115. Pace adjusted Timeform US rating for Concrete Rose. Timeform US had the mile call, color-coded blue, meaning it was helping horses that were forwardly placed. That would seem to jive when you take a look and see that the horses that ran first, third, and fourth at the top of the lane, they were 1, 3, and 2. If you want to add in a piece for Just Wonderful, she came from farther out of it, but at the top of the lane, she was in fourth. So basically, at that point, if you weren't in that sort of position, you weren't going to be really competitive. I just thought it was a really all-around terrific effort from Concrete Rose. And I said coming out of that run down at Churchill down the Edgewood, it was an instance where she never changed leads. She took over from a horse and Newspaper of Record that maybe needed a race before we were going to see her best. A number of things that I just was not totally sold that at the short price she figured to be in this spot, that Concrete Rose was ready to deliver a performance like this. Obviously, I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot on Saturday at Belmont Park. She was spectacular. To me, visually the best effort from really any of the horses that ran in those big races. I just thought all around she checked every box. She did everything she was supposed to do. I like that she has that ability to stay close to the pace. I've talked about it time and time again. The thing that separates, to me anyway, some of the best turf runners that we've had over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years has been the ability to be relatively close to the pace, but still have a late kick, a turn of foot that is on par or close to anyway, what those horses coming from the sort of deep back are capable of producing. If you have the ability, like a Wise Dan, like a Tepin, to be able to sit just off of the pace and still be able to finish on par with what those horses coming from dead last are sort of doing, I mean, you're always going to have that giant advantage over them. You're always going to be able to get the job done. Concrete Rose, I have nothing but good things to say about her coming out of this effort. I think it was just a spectacular effort all around. Just Wonderful, fine effort from her. Interesting to see sort of the form reversal. She hadn't really been doing much over in Europe. Maybe this is a sort of sign of things to come, or perhaps it was the Lasix going back on. Maybe we'll see her at the end of the year in the Breeders' Cup. Cambier Park, thought it was an inoffensive effort. Thought she ran her race. No match for the top 2, but it was, or I shouldn't say the top 2, no match for the winner. She was only a nose behind. Just Wonderful. But really, when it boils down to it, I thought it was a solid effort, not spectacular. Jody, the Japanese import, she set the pace. She stayed on at the end, but again, maybe that pace situation contributed to her sticking around. Fractions of 24-1, 49-14 for 3/4. They stopped the clock in a shade under 2 minutes flat. This was just all around. I think there's some things outside of Concrete Rose. I don't know what else there is really to say for basically runners 2 through 7. Then you get to runners 8 and 9, who are 2 Chad Brown horses. One is Olendon, and I say is a Chad Brown horse, will be a Chad Brown horse here before you know it. And Newspaper of Record. We'll start with Olendon. I picked this filly. I thought she was in a perfect position, and it looked like she was going to run. Down on the inside, rounding the far turn beneath Velasquez. And then all of a sudden, something got a little bit weird, where she seemed to brush the hedge on the inside, then outside, bounced into Cambier Park, and after that, she had nothing. She just never fired. I don't know why she grazed the hedge the way that she did. I don't know if Perhaps something, maybe, you hear people talk about the idea that bouncing off of horses can kind of cause some horses to lose their action, maybe lose their breath, whatever the case may be. I have no idea if that's anything that went on with this horse. I found it a peculiar non-effort after that point, because up until that point, she looked like she was going to fire a big shot. We'll find out. I'm sure now that she's here with Chad, we'll see bigger and better things to come. Newspaper of record. I don't know. The idea of trying to rate her or use this as sort of the experiment to find out if she can rate going 10 furlongs, I suppose I can see it from one standpoint, where if you say that you're not sold that she's going to get 10 furlongs if you just let her wing it and ding it on the front end, okay, fair enough. If that's the case, though, should she have even been running in this spot? If you really weren't sold that 10 furlongs was going to be to her advantage or to her liking, and if you figured you needed to do something different to get the 10 furlongs, that just seems like a lot to ask of a horse that thus far just hasn't really shown the same form as a 3-year-old that she showed as a 2-year-old. I was listening to the Naira broadcast, and Maggie Wolfendale, who is as good as anyone at taking a look at horses and seeing and making observations, she noted that Newspaper of Record didn't look like she had grown. She looked the same at 2 as she does now. And maybe it is just as simple as she was that ultimate precocious 2-year-old that just never really took that next step forward, when all the other girls, they've all continued to evolve, most notably a horse like Concrete Rose, who they just continue to get bigger and stronger and better. Again, using that analogy I've used in the past with 2-year-olds moving over to 3-year-olds, are you that 6th grade little leaguer who, or I shouldn't say 6th grade little leaguer, but you get what I'm saying. Are you that kid that's 11 years old, who's 6 feet tall and throws, 70 miles an hour, but you stay that is you. You don't get any bigger. You don't develop any more as you get older. Meanwhile, all your kids, all your contemporaries anyway, that they were no match for you at that point, they continue to grow and get bigger and stronger, and then they go and pass you by. Maybe that's the case here, because mentally also with Newspaper of Record, it doesn't seem like she's improved from her 2-year-old campaign. She's still ranked. She's still headstrong. Even when she's out there in the clear, she's pulling. She wants to go. I do wonder if maybe if you're not 100% on board that she just can't run anymore, maybe it is an instance where you just need to look, or maybe the connections, it would behoove them to think of the idea of, maybe you just look at it and say, distance isn't going to really be productive for her. Maybe the longer it goes, the worse she's going to be. We know that she's a little bit of a headstrong kind of nutty filly to begin with. Maybe you find some sort of a mile race and you just try to run them off their feet. I would say, think back to a number of years ago, Sydney's Candy in the La Jolla, where just opened up by what seemed like 25 lengths down the backstretch and just continued on with it. Maybe that's the point that we're at with Newspaper of Record, because she had done enough running in those first 2 starts to make you think that, okay, well, obviously they're not great efforts compared to what her form was as a 2-year-old. And the finishes, they just weren't really there. But maybe at a flat mile, you just try to bottom the field out and you just go. You just go guns blazing. You almost run it like a dirt race. You just go. Just a thought, because right now it doesn't seem like anything is necessarily going her direction. Distance, I don't know if longer is better. Trying to rate her doesn't look like that's something that's going to work. Maybe an equipment change, who knows? Or maybe it is as simple as she just is not as good now as she once was. And all the other girls have passed her by. But Newspaper of Record, no other way to put this other than bit of an unmitigated disaster. She impeded some horses in the first turn and down the backside. We'll find out. It'll be interesting to see what they do with her going forward. Concrete Rose, though, going forward, looks like she's got a giant future. My concern with her mechanics and things of that nature, she didn't do any of that sort of stuff this time around. She was a consummate professional, and she buried this field in a Grade 1 race. Really impressive effort from Concrete Rose. She gets the job done in the Belmont Oaks. 90 Beyer 115 pace-adjusted time form U.S. rating, as we did last week because of things still being in flux down in New York in the office. There will not be a full stakes montage. There will not be a best Beyer segment, but I will go through and just sort of rip through the rest of the Belmont Stakes from Saturday afternoon, give you some thoughts and some opinions on those races. Let's go on to that segment. Wrap things up with some quick thoughts on the three other graded stakes races at Belmont Saturday. The Suburban Preservationist rides the rail to get the job done. This is a horse that's had clearly some physical issues because he's, I believe, 5 or 6 years old at this point. He's only made a handful of starts, but the talent is very obvious. I believe he's only once in his career earned a Beyer less than 90. This time around, he comes and he earns a high 100 Beyer. A really nice effort all around, but I do think you look at it and you say, very early with the lead change, and I know those of you that don't care about it, whatever. Usually, to me, an early lead change is not a sign of positive things, but again, it kind of makes sense for a horse that's been a little bit ouchy throughout his career, and he rode the rail throughout. I think it was a good effort. I'm not trying to say that it was, all dressed up, because he did. He earned a legitimate figure in here. But I will say, when you compare it to one or two other trips, perhaps you want to factor that in going forward. When it comes to Catholic Boy, he was a little bit keen early on because the pace didn't really materialize. I don't blame Javier for going on with it. To me, this is more a disappointing effort from Catholic Boy than it was any sort of a premature move like I've seen some people discuss, whether it's on social media or whatever the case may be. I think Javier did the right thing. If you've got the horse and you think that the distance isn't a problem and he wants to go and the pace is not going swift whatsoever, go on with it and see what you can do. I thought Catholic Boy was just a little bit empty in this spot, and perhaps it is more a sign of preservationist being really, really good. Or maybe it's an instance where Catholic Boy, you know what? The goal all along, you've heard little, I don't want to say through the grapevine, but you heard early on in the season that Jonathan Thomas said they were going to campaign him with eyes on certain goals. The summer or the first giant goal being the Whitney. So the Suburban, obviously, I'm sure the Connections would have loved to have won the race. But if this is a means to an end for a race that is in 4 weeks' time, I think you're probably going to look at it and say, you know what, he got what he needed out of it, and he'll be ready to go up at Saratoga going 9 furlongs against good horses. I could sit here and say he finished second, he was the second best horse. I think he was the third best horse in the race behind Pavel. I think Pavel, and I'm sure some people will roll their eyes and say Pavel, he doesn't win races. Pavel's best efforts come away from Southern California. He does not run well at Santa Anita. He runs decently enough, I guess, at Del Mar. When you get him to the East Coast, he's a different animal. He really wakes up. He's run well at Belmont in the past. He's run well at Saratoga in the past. He's run well at Parks in the past. He's run well at Churchill Downs in the past. To me, this is an instance where if he was not as wide as he was, and to be honest, I don't think there was anything else you really could have done. If you're Mario Gutierrez, you're breaking from the 11 hole at 1.25 miles at Belmont Park. You're breaking on the turn. You're going to be hung wide. I don't know what to tell you. It's just not going to be a great trip. There's really no way to spin that. But for him to come, look like he's going to threaten for a bit, and sure, Preservationist kicks away, but when you compare the ground loss differential, I think you would at least narrow that gap. I thought this was a good effort from Pavel. And he's the kind of horse that I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in a race like the Whitney. Catholic Boy will be there. I assume maybe Preservationist will be there. McKinsey might be there. Some other big names might show up for that race. Maybe Seeking the Soul. Who knows? If all that kind of stuff happens, maybe Pavel is a sneaky kind of chance in a race like that at another nice price. He was 8-1 here. Maybe he's in that 10-1 range for a race like the Whitney. I think that distance might be a little bit better for him as well, 1 1/8 miles. I don't think this was a bad effort from him. I think he ran the second best race behind Preservationist, and then Catholic Boy ran the third best race. The John A. Nehrude, look, promises fulfilled. When Achille Beg's captain misses the break as badly as he does, and promises fulfilled, allowed to get out there and get a opening quarter north of 23 seconds, the race is effectively over. I mean, for the most part, unless something terrible happens, promises fulfilled is going to win with a trip like that. I can't help but question the race itself and the quality of it when Achille Beg's captain, who is a nice horse, but I don't think anyone is mistaking him for a potential grade 1 type. When he is last and still gets a big piece of this thing with a giant brush up the backside, a move that never ever works, when he's able to get a piece of this thing, I can't help but wonder a little bit from a quality standpoint, but also from a tactical standpoint. Jose Ortiz, we know he is as good as there is in the business. I thought it was a little bit of a passive ride on Nicodemus, where he's in behind New York Central, and it just seems like the horse maybe is... maybe he's not super comfortable in there, or maybe he's just waiting for a place to go. Eventually, when he gets out into the clear, he comes with a little bit of a run. It's far too late at that point. He finishes fourth, I believe. So I think that was a little bit of a passive ride. Could have been a little bit more aggressive, and he's one, Nicodemus, that I would keep an eye on wherever he should show up next. But again, from the quality standpoint, when the pace is that slow, the closers have no chance. But when a horse like Killybegs Captain makes some giant brush and is still able to get a piece of this thing, I can't help but wonder a little bit about the quality. We'll find out in some time. A little bit of just an oddly run race there in the Nayrod. And the Dwyer, the last one we'll touch on, there was no pace in this race whatsoever. And a horse like Code of Honor coming off the bench, I thought this was going to be an opportunity maybe to beat him. And he just proved to be so far superior to this field. He earned a 97 winning this race, rallying from off of it. Johnny V dropped the stick in mid-stretch. Didn't matter. The horse goes and buries him. I'm hopeful the connections keep him at one turn. He is a capable horse at two turns. I think he takes his game to the next level at one turn. But I can understand where people look at it and say, this divisional championship is still wide open. And to really realistically get an opportunity or a chance to be viewed as a main player to win 3-year-old of the year, you probably need to go run in and win the Travers, as opposed to the Allen Jerkins and then going on to those other races like that. So I would keep him at one turn. Wouldn't be surprised if the connections choose to stretch him back out for a race like the Travers up at Saratoga. Rowayton, it was essentially a carbon copy of his trip last time out in that N1X, where he's in behind horses on the far turn, nowhere to go. The rail opens up, he scoots through, and he gets the job done. The difference is this time around, he had to wait a little bit longer, and you've got a monster in Code of Honor that loops the field. Again, another one of those just sort of, I guess it's a perfect trip until it's not, but there's still a part of me that would love to just let the horse run if you can get him into the clear a little bit earlier, or it's always that dangerous position of sitting that pocket trip, because if an instance like that happens where you don't get to go and another horse gets the jump on you that is equal or greater as far as ability is concerned, you're kind of screwed. So, I get it in. Look, there's always going to be issues and instances where things just don't work out, but I'm hopeful next time. I still think Rowayton can fire a big shot in one of these races. He just needs to get a little bit more. I just like to see him in the clear a little bit more as opposed to sitting in that pocket trip tucked down on the rail. We'll find out next time wherever he should show up. But some quality racing all around at Belmont Park on Saturday afternoon. Hopefully some of you had better luck than I did, because I was nowhere. Until next time, though, hopefully we'll get some good things going, and it can't help but be good when coming up on Thursday afternoon, it's opening day up at Saratoga Racecourse, upstate New York. So good things to come. The preview edition, I'm sure I'll be talking about Saratoga in one fashion or another, however it may be. However you've been listening to this, thank you for doing so. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. Please rate, review, and subscribe however you listen to it. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or directly to me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. I will be back on Thursday with the preview edition. Saratoga will be the main topic of conversation, again, in some fashion, whether we look at some races for the upcoming weekend or to talk about the Saratoga meet in general or whatever it may be. Still got some time to figure that out. Until then, best of luck however you play, whatever you play, and wherever you play. It's been the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show.